Welcome back to the channel, and welcome to the place where it all started. We are on the former Albert Road leading to the abandoned ghost town of Daniels, Maryland. And so I'm back here in honor of, or to celebrate, 50 uploads on the channel. I figured after 50 videos and a couple that I made that you ended up not seeing, I hopefully have gotten a tad bit better at making these things. So I wanted to come back to the place where I did my very first video and kind of do a do-over. I've got about a half a mile walk before I get to the first sort of turn off to the first stop that I want to show you guys. The history of Daniels can be divided up into three, arguably four, three or four, depending on how you want to look at it, phases in its history. And so it started around 1830 when two brothers, Thomas and Asher Ely, spelled E-L-Y. I can't find anything on how to pronounce it, so I have been pronouncing it Eli. Maybe it's Ellie, I don't know. But they purchased the land where the mill and where Daniels ended up being just a couple of years before the B&O Railroad actually passed right through town, with eventual plans to open a cotton mill. And so in the early 1830s, 1831, I believe, the B&O Railroad developed or built a stop at what had then become known as Elysville. I've been calling it Elysville, Elliesville, I don't know how to pronounce it. But so if someone knows, please let me know. And they developed basically a cotton mill right along the B&O Railroad. However, the brothers and the company in general just had trouble from the outset. They had land disputes with people, they had financial trouble, they just could never seem to get their footing. By 1860, the town had actually, or around 1860, the town had actually been auctioned off to another family, the Gary family. And that started phase two. They renamed the town as Alberton. And so this road actually that we're walking on now, this road, this path, used to be an old, it was an official road for vehicles to drive from the main road out here, and it was known as Alberton Road. And so we'll get into this a little bit later, but now obviously it's become a unmaintained walking path in this Patapsco Valley State Park. So when this family, the Gary family, took over, it was bought by James Sullivan Gary at first, and his son, who would later take over for his dad, was James Albert Gary. And so I'm fairly certain that the town was named after James Sullivan's son, Albert. They ran things in a very different way. So the Garys were originally from New England. James, the original owner, grew up starting at age 5, I believe, working in different mills and factories in New England before moving down to Maryland to attempt to start his own factory. And so he took all of that operation experience, I guess, and how mills operated in New England and applied them to the factory down here. And so they actually ran things in a very paternalistic way. So they were more than just owners of the mill. They were owners and overseers of the entire town. They owned the mill. They built factory worker housing here, which we're going to see the remains of and the remnants of as we get closer into town here. They built churches, stores, theaters, and various different entertainment and utility options, all owned, run, managed, overseen, whatever, by the Gary family. It was isolated, but it was also very idyllic. People did not have a lot. They didn't have a lot, but they didn't have a lot of need either. When James, the dad, James, suddenly passed away in 1870, just 10, 15 years after taking over ownership, his son, James Albert Gary, took over. And so the son ran the company in the town in a similar paternalistic way until he died in 1920, when the third and final Gary, Edward Stanley Gary, took over. And so each generation ran things a little, from my understanding, a little more loose, a little less sort of iron fist paternalistic than the previous one. So by the time we got to Stanley Gary in 1920, he was not interested, or not as interested, in being as hands-on as his dad and grandfather. And so it needs to be said that while the face of things, sort of the public image, was a very idyllic one, I think behind the scenes there was a lot of child labor going on. There was a lot of arguably exploitative labor practices going on. And so there's a compare and contrast with that. And I'm not going to begin to guess how that actually played out, but it's good to call out both sides of the coin. So what I'm looking for here, before we get to the third phase of things, I'm looking for a path off to the right up here that's supposed to lead to the ruins of one of what was 5 churches that were here in a town of no more than 800 people at the most. Supposedly there's a path that's supposed to go up here. Oh, so look at this. So I'd mentioned that they had built family housing units here along this road. I believe this is remnants of some of those sidewalks and just edgings from the housing units. So you can see how the river kind of comes here and then it starts to curve a little bit. So it curves around this landmass, and right here is where the old Gary Church was. Oh, okay. So we're gonna get to all of that in a minute, but I'm gonna walk up this path here and see if this is where we need to go, because it'll take us to I believe the oldest, or the ruins of the oldest church here, which is the St. Stanislaus Kostka Catholic Church. There's the ruins right there. And check this out. Look at these old cars just in this ditch here. So we'll talk about this more in a minute once we get through the rest of the history. But in 1972, Hurricane Agnes came through here and absolutely demolished this entire area. And so I'm guessing that's what, man, that was a hill to walk up. I'm guessing that's what a lot of these cars are probably from. Just getting washed away from the hurricane. So this is the remnants of the St. Stanislaus Kostka Church, which was erected in 1879 and then was actually destroyed by a fire in 1926. And I had no idea. Well, I had some idea that this place existed when I was here before, but I had no idea how to get up here. Look how small this is. So even if you figure, call it 100, 200 people in the town, I know the camera's not doing a great job of picking up the actual size, but let's play pretend here. If you have the pulpit right here, you could get maybe 50 people. I don't really have a concept, but you're not getting more than maybe 50 or 100 people crammed into this little spot. Oh, and look at this. The front steps are still here. Very cool. So yeah, that is one of 5 churches in a town that at its max had 850 people or 800 people, something like that. So clearly, at least for a while, religion was very important to at least the company owners, if not all of the members of the town. So let's go back down to the path. We'll finish up the history of the town. Look at this. Is that a drive shaft? Yeah. You got the old transmission and the engine. I mean, this is completely buried in here. That's crazy that that's just sitting there. I know a little bit about cars, but not enough. Is anyone who's car smart, is that the right term? Smarter than me, know what this is? Can we make this out by the headlights of the bumper, maybe? But look, it's even got the old wheels and tires. I can't believe the engine block is still there too. Oh, and here's the other one down here. But if you didn't know the history of this place, you'd just be trouncing through the woods, randomly come across old cars and a microwave. And then I don't know what that is right there. Wow, that's crazy. Oh, it's deep. Edward Gary, who was the last who took over in 1920, saw it through the Great Depression. And so at one point during its sort of lowest point, I believe they had something like 35 employees at the mill, and it was run something like 25% capacity. So things were not great, but it did stay open during the Gary, we'll call it the Gary administration. They had built a beautifully manicured green space around the factory. So it was very well manicured. There were stores and shops. One of the things that they built right next to the factory, I'm gonna hold still here. Can you see the church tower right here? That's the St. Albans Episcopal Church, that the shell of which is obviously still standing, although I believe the company that owns it now, there's at least a welding company in here. I believe it also processes mulch too, but they use it as some sort of warehouse. But yeah, I mean, the shell of that, and that was built in 1895, I believe. And you can see what remains of the old factory, the cotton mill here. As we come along the river, it makes a big loop and then continues down that way. And I believe at the time, where is it here? So there were houses all along this area here. And there's a pedestrian bridge. I think the pieces of which you could see, it might be that. But there was actually a pedestrian bridge that went across that connected the two sides so that people that lived on this side of the river could get over to the other side. The company, when they built the mill, they built it for the purposes of utilizing the current from the river, but they created a mill race that basically created a cutout in from the river here, kind of across and through the factory, and then out the other side to take advantage of the current, again, that came through. I didn't realize that that church was here before. So that's 2 of 5 churches. One of them, an evangelical church, actually met in one of the town office buildings, so they didn't have their own building, so we don't have anything to see, so we're going to count that as 3, just knowing that that exists. There's an active church, actually, the Gary Memorial Church on the backside here, that is still an active church, but that is 4. And then up here, when we get around the corner, we're going to see what we saw before, the Pentecostal church. This is all the remains of retaining walls and curbing. That's all that's left from rows of multifamily housing that was set up all along here. And it's all gone. So in 1940, the financial situation got so bad for Edward Gary, he was unable to obtain credit and keep things afloat financially enough that he ended up, or I guess the creditors or the banks, some financial institution that had a stake in their financials, forced the town to go to auction. And so at the auction in 1940, a representative from the C.R. Daniels Company out of New York was the only bidder on the town and the mill and the property. And they bought it for $65,000. And there's something like 120 homes, 550 acres. It was a huge area here, at least relatively speaking. And so there are stories about how townspeople were thrilled to have a wealthy buyer come in. They had hopes and plans of them sort of bolstering things financially again, getting things back into a good state. And at first, that happened. The Daniels Company came in and they cleaned things up. They did a bunch of financial investments to try to improve the area. They cleared out debts for people and for the stores and things, and sort of tried to get everything on a good footing. But they were not interested in operating in the same paternalistic fashion as the Gary family was. They had a much more modern business style, I guess, if you will. Oh, here's more of that. So there would have been homes all along here, houses. It looks like I think I saw, yeah, look at that. How crazy is this? So there's a picture that I'll put up now of Alberton Road with these row homes, or tenement housing as they call it. Look at this. You've got what I'm assuming are the front steps from the old houses, potentially, that were here. I have to guess that that's, well, no, because you have steps here. I have to guess that that's what that was, but it's obviously steps to some sort of establishment. I believe that's a retaining wall, so I'm not, maybe it wasn't housing. But there was something, but you can see all these old things just buried in the ground. No markings, no anything. You just have to know they're there, or have to know to look for them. And so after their initial investment, they basically stopped putting any effort into the town, into the upkeep. It was a very different way of life and a different change of, I guess, like a change of pace for all the residents that were here, who were used to, for the prior 80 years, were used to this paternalistic, like almost Big Brother-esque way of operating. And so that's how things were for the last phase, I guess, of Daniels. They took over 1940-ish, and that lasted in that new way of operating until the mid-1960s. And I believe, so this was either an old pedestrian bridge or may have been the first. So the B&O Railroad actually came through here initially in a different path and then had to be reconfigured to be straightened out. And I'm wondering if this was the first path of the railroad, then this is its final one. It kind of continues on, not kind of, it continues on over there, and this looks much straighter. So I kind of wonder if it first came through here, and then when it was straightened, did this. But anyway, I think it's important to call out the lack of upkeep, I guess, because there weren't a lot of amenities here. There weren't. They didn't have sewage. The people that lived here, there was no public sewage system. There was no hot water. They had cold water that was brought in from a reservoir, I believe, nearby, but no hot water. They did have electricity from the late 1800s. But it was a very, very basic way of living. Okay, so now I don't know what this is. So I know that there was a pedestrian bridge, or like a car/people bridge, and then the railroad. And I know the railroad had to be straightened out. So I'm guessing this might have been the car bridge, the people bridge, whatever you want to call it. Oh, and then you can see behind it there is the fourth church, and the only one that is still active, the Gary Memorial Church. And then right across the river from that is the fifth and final church, which we've seen before if you've watched my first video, which is the remnants of the Pentecostal, was it Pentecostal Holiness or Holiness Pentecostal Church? Let's just take a look at this really quick, and then I'll finish up the final history of the town. Every one of these churches has a bell tower on it. I wonder if anyone covered up a really cool picture back here of there's a lady. Oh, they did cover it up. Is there no respect among graffiti artists anymore? Why would they cover it up? That was such a cool picture. But same sort of thing as with that Catholic church. It's basically the same size. I mean, you're gonna get nobody in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So maybe 7 to 10 people across, and then maybe 10. So maybe 100 people. So interestingly, and I'm going to see, you can go over to the other side of the river here, so when we're done here and I get back to the car, I'm going to drive around, see if we can get over to that other side. But that church was built in 1879. This one was built in 1940. So right around the time we were talking about that the town was auctioned off to the Daniels Company was exactly when this was built. It's interesting that this one is completely destroyed and this one is still going strong. So by the mid 1960s, so 25-ish years after the Daniels Company took over, this type of business operation, the company town, had, especially in this area, had all but disappeared. Daniels was actually one of the last towns that operated in this fashion in the mid-Atlantic area, and possibly the country, actually, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it's the whole country. but they were already experiencing pressures from more efficiently designed and operated mills in the south. Most of the other areas had closed up shop. The mills around the area had closed up shop. And so Daniels was kind of it was like a little piece of active Americana that was existing from sort of a bygone era. And so around that point, the mid-1960s, I was reading there was something like 20 to 25%, only 20 to 25% of the factory workers actually still lived in town here. Here's more car parts just randomly in the woods here. But so yeah, even workers were moving out. They weren't sort of participating in the company town philosophy anymore. And so for reasons that I cannot find, I have looked everywhere. Seems like nothing was ever actually officially announced. In 1965, during a period of what was success for the company, they, with no town meetings, no discussion, no notices, they sent out letters to all of the residents in the town, letting them know that they had 1 year to vacate their houses because the Daniels Company was demolishing the entire town. Likely, the company was tired of sort of doing that paternalistic type management. They wanted to get out of that business, I would guess. There may have been some financial pressures, but nothing was ever disclosed. And that really put a lot of pressure on people and created a lot of hardships for people, because retirees from the factory would stay living in the town housing because they could get it for so cheap. And so here we are now at the edge of this dam that I believe was actually built around the same time as the railroad that came through in I think the 1830s. Maybe I'm off by a century, but I don't think so. But yeah, I mean, the end of Daniels, the end of 100 and call it from 1830 to 1965, just ended like that. No discussion, no anything. And so within the next year or two, despite pressures from all sorts of government officials, historical trusts, etc., including, if you can believe it, even the Smithsonian reached out to Daniels, wanting them to preserve the town as sort of keep it as a living representation of how life was in prior times. But despite all of those pressures, the Daniels Company ignored it, and within a year or two, they demolished the entire thing, flattened all of it. They wanted to keep the mill that's over there, so they kept that, and they kept the operations going from the mill, but all the housing, all the buildings, all that just gone. However, as I mentioned a little bit ago when we first saw those cars, just a couple of years later, in 1972, Hurricane Agnes came through here and absolutely demolished this place. Just massive, massive, massive flooding. And so it was actually viewed, the one quote I saw was that it was divine intervention that the Daniels Company mysteriously decided to just clean house just a couple years beforehand, because if there were still people living in here, that would have been a massive death toll. There would have been way more destruction. It just would have been way, way worse than it was. So that's kind of the end of the third era, but I mentioned there are arguably 4 eras, and so the fourth one is now. So after the St. Agnes flooding, the state of Maryland basically came in and condemned all of the land and took it over and incorporated it into what was the surrounding Patapsco Valley State Park. The Daniels Company kept the mill even though it was almost a total loss. They kept that going until a couple years later when a fire came through and basically just took out the rest of what was available to burn by the mill. And so at some point along the way, Daniels got out of the business here. It's changed hands over the years, and it's currently run by a welding company. But you can see the Gary Church over there. The state actually took over that land too, but then deeded it back to the church. It's funny, I was just talking about a hurricane, but I'm fighting against time with a rainstorm and darkness that's coming. So I'm gonna walk the mile, 2 miles, whatever, back to the car. I'm gonna see if I can circle back, get over to the other side of the river here. And we'll finish things up over there, because I think there's like a little plaque with some pictures, probably the same ones that I've spliced into here already, as well as some more information. I'll see you in a minute. Oh, I remember seeing this from before. I wonder if this was from the hurricane, or it's gotta be, right? Look at this. It's like a big wig or some version of that. Just upside down in the river. I found more remnants of the old housing units here too that I missed the first time coming up. This is actually pretty far out too. I've been walking for 10 or 15 minutes. But yeah, I mean, this just shows you it came all the way out here. It's crazy. Oh, last one. I remember seeing this from before. But just another car chassis. I mean, just absolutely buried. All right, so here we are now on the other side of the river. You can see the dam back there. And here's the Gary Memorial Church. And I'm pretty sure that there's a plaque over here. So that's the welding company, who does not take kindly to visitors checking out their property. Yep, I was right. Okay, let's see how good my history recollection was. Milltown History, Daniels, Maryland. So I'm sure you probably have seen this picture already. This is where we came in from before, this path right along here. Walked around. Down here is where the church is, the Pentecostal church. And you see there are houses all along here. Even all the way back over here. Move my finger so you can see. Back here is where we saw that big opening with the retaining wall. And look, if you see back here, remember I mentioned there's housing all along here too? That area there is this area right along here. And so you have the Gary Memorial Church here. I mean, you had all this housing. Even 68 was around the time that they were, right when they were demolishing. So this may be one of the last pictures that was taken of those places. But anyway, just thought I would kind of close the loop with that. But yeah, this was hopefully a different look at the town, the ghost town of Elysville, Alberton, Daniels, Maryland, one of the last company towns, mill towns in the United States. And now there's nothing left. All right, yep, I think we're gonna call that it for this video. Again, thank you all so much for your support. 50 videos, who saw that coming? So here's to 50 more. If you like this video, do me a favor, leave me a comment, hit the little thumbs up button, subscribe if you feel so compelled. I'd really appreciate it. hit that little notification bell, tell you when I upload. Like I always mention, any interaction helps grow the channel. And yeah, till next time, I will talk to you soon. All right, bye.